Hi, and welcome to TLC's Passport to Nature. Today's topic is natural intelligence, how nature plans for future generations, and you can too. My name is Lisa Morry, and I am TLC's Donor Relations Manager. Really happy you could join us here today. Welcome, everyone. I'm recording this presentation from my home on the beautiful Saanich Peninsula, which is also the unceded and traditional territories of the Saanich First Nations, whose relationship with the land continues to this day. I'm grateful to have been born on this magical island, which I absolutely love, a second generation settler in this region, and a sixth generation settler in Canada on my father's side. My ancestry is English, Scottish, and Spanish. Some of the flora and fauna I'll be talking about today are part of Garry Oak Meadows that Indigenous people tended in this region for millennia. Before European colonization, this stewarded ecosystem encompassed most of the peninsula and much of southern Vancouver Island. But due to forced displacement of Indigenous caretakers and subsequent agriculture and urbanization, it has been reduced to fragmented pockets with only about 5% of the original meadows remaining. I'm thankful to still have the opportunity to learn about the unique diversity of life in Garry Oak Meadows, and I acknowledge that it is entirely due to the longtime stewardship of local First Nations. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Land Conservancy of BC, I thought I'd start by sharing a bit of information about us and how we work to protect natural communities in BC. Founded in 1997, the Land Conservancy is a charitable, nonprofit land trust working throughout British Columbia to protect land and habitat for wildlife. TLC envisions a future where the biological diversity of BC is protected for the benefit of current and future generations. We work to protect key habitats to keep them safe from development. We work to restore ecosystems back to their natural state, and we work to share knowledge to foster informed and engaged communities. Today, we will be looking at some nature survival strategies, including several fascinating ways animals and plants plan ahead to ensure the survival of their next generations, such as live in community, think forward, provide future resources, wait for a rainy day, steal resources, hide in the leaves, have a drought plan, network, scatter your eggs, focus on fecundity, guard your eggs, and finally we'll consider what we can do to help support our next generations and the natural world we all depend on. The long-term survival of humans has relied on group living, which provides safety, support, sharing of food and other resources, a community where everyone supports one another for the benefit of all. As humans, we spend many years nurturing our children from infancy through an extended period of dependence, ensuring their long-term health and well-being, and thus the survival of the next generation. Unlike many other animals, humans live communally, relying on others for support. Thanks to the success of our ancestors, we are in a unique position to be able to consider and increase the chances of thriving, not only for our own offspring, but for the rest of the flora and fauna that make up the natural world we are part of. By supporting environmental organizations, you are already taking an important step in protecting our natural world for the coming generations. For many other life forms on Earth, when we think about it, planning for the future means coming up with various strategies to ensure the continuation of the next generation, often when the adults are no longer in the picture. A practice I learned about a few years ago from Bob Joseph, who's the co-founder of the Indigenous Relations Academy. Highly recommend you check it out. It's a practice many of you may already be familiar with. It's the Indigenous practice of thinking forward for the benefit of 7 generations. So this time period spans somewhere between 175 to 200 years. And the idea is that the decisions we make today should result in a sustainable world 7 generations into the future. So if we want our great-great-grandchildren to live in a clean and healthy world, We need to start thinking and planning with this beautiful practice in mind. Again, I highly recommend you check out the Indigenous Relations Academy. The link is here on screen for more information about how we can work to actively decolonize our thinking and forward the journey of reconciliation. They have a variety of in-person and online training available, and it's www.indigenousrelationsacademy.com. Okay, let's talk about providing future resources as one of the strategies. Mason bees and ground nesting bees are native bees in our region. Many of you are probably familiar with mason bees. Most native bees are solitary, meaning they don't live in hives or colonies like honeybees. And they come in a wide range of sizes, colors, and patterns. Mason bees are only active for about 4 to 6 weeks, starting in the early spring, and the rest of their life cycle is actually spent as egg, larvae, and pupae inside their nesting holes. So they typically seek out pre-drilled holes in trees or stumps or hollowed out twigs, stems. I've even had one using a hole in my wood siding this spring by my front door, so that was really fun to watch it trying to make a nest in there. Female eggs are laid first in the back of the tunnel, and male eggs are laid last, with the idea being they're near the front of the tunnel. This way, the males emerge first and are ready to mate when the females do finally emerge. Mated females then get right to work with nest building. They search for suitable cavities and will often choose the same tube or tunnel they emerged from, as they like to stay close by. They like to stay in the same area. Once a nest is chosen, then she begins collecting pollen for her young. So she's flying around from flower to flower, pollinating everything that's blooming early, and she stores that pollen in the back of her nest until she feels she's collected enough to make a pollen store for her coming young. She then backs out and lays an egg on top of that mound, and that will be the future food for that larvae. Now, the mason part of the mason bee comes into effect. So she searches now for mud or clay or fine ground up, chewed up plant material, fine gravel, and she'll make a mixture of that, and she'll create a partition, and she'll enclose that pollen ball and that single egg in its own chamber. And then this process is repeated until the tunnel is full. And as I mentioned, females live only about 4 to 6 weeks. So after she dies, the eggs hatch out, the larval bees then eat the pollen snack, and then the immature bees will overwinter as pupae in little spun cocoons. You may have seen the cocoons at Buckerfields or one of the feed supply stores. Like mason bees, mining bees are solitary bees too, but they nest in the ground. If you've ever seen a little hole like this surrounded by a mound of dirt, you probably have some ground nesting bees. And this is like a little diagram showing the bee here and her chambers down below. I had a bunch of these little holes in my pollinator meadow last year, everywhere that there was bare ground. So it was really satisfying to see that they were making a home in my meadow in my backyard. Ground nesting bees' life cycle is pretty much the same as mason bees. They're short-lived as adults, and they overwinter as pupae, waiting for those spring temperatures to rise to signal that it's time to emerge again. So we can see that these hardworking native bees like to provide future resources for their young after their lifetime. So they've already gone by the time their young are making use of their planning. So they're doing what they can do to ensure the success of their next generation. As you can tell, I really like bees. So a strategy employed by native bees in desert climates is to wait for a rainy day. Due to harsh conditions, lack of rainfall, and a very limited flowering window often, desert bees really have their work cut out for them to get their life cycle successfully completed. To survive in this harsh condition, desert bees have evolved some really interesting strategies. For one, desert bees may not hatch every year. Sometimes they will wait, remaining dormant in a state of extended diapause for several years in their nest, waiting for favorable conditions to arise. Um, some species will hatch out at a rate of 50%, with the remaining half waiting for another year or two to increase the chances of long-term survival of this species, which I think is really amazing adaptations. Because of extended periods of drought, desert plants flower for such a brief period of time that rainfall will often trigger ground nesting bees' emergence to coincide with the plant's brief flowering window so that they can get that pollen and nectar. So as you can see here in this chart, desert bees may only have a week or two of peak blooming period. So, we're going from January to April, in which to mate, collect nectar and pollen, lay their eggs for the next generation of bees. It's a very tight timeline for these guys, but you can see how waiting for a rainy day can really make sense when your lifespan is so short. Strategy, steal resources. Okay, so this is not a very nice sounding way to protect the next generation, but I thought it was an interesting one, nevertheless. So some animals, including bees, will steal the resources of others for the benefit of their own young. And in this case, we're specifically talking about kleptoparasitic bees, which are also known as cuckoo bees, which might remind you of the cuckoo bird. Cuckoo bees lay their eggs in other bees' nests. Like this one pictured here, you can see they have a really distinct pointed abdomen. Female cuckoo bees do not collect pollen for their young, but because they visit pollen-producing flowers to find nectar for themselves, they are nevertheless considered pollinators because they're spreading pollen between the flowers as they go about finding their nectar meals. The female cuckoo bee parasitizes other bees' nests by watching and waiting for the other mother bee to leave the nest. And then they break into the nest compartment using their pointed abdomen and lay their eggs inside the compartment. So their larvae hatch very quickly, and with their large mandible, you can see here, they kill the host bee larva and consume any food left behind by the original mother bee. This may seem like a species that is a threat to the long-term survival of the other bees, but cuckoo bees have co-evolved alongside their host bees and are not considered a threat to the health of the host species. Enough of both species survive to continue the next generation. Strategy, hide in the leaves. One of the strategies we may not think about is happening all over the province in everyone's backyard every year. So many species of butterflies and other beneficial insects actually make use of fallen leaves, hollow twigs, old logs, and plant material we might consider to be weeds and plants we might consider to be weeds as host plants for their young, a food source, or as a cozy, warm place to snuggle up and survive the winter in. So our desire to have perfect yards with uniculture lawns, all tidy garden beds, and rake up all those leaves has a very real and very negative impact on native species for many of the creatures who call our neighborhoods and our gardens home. So hiding in the leaves is another strategy insects will use to support the survival of the next generation of butterflies in this case, but of many insects. So here we're having a look at this angel wing, Calma. It's one of the butterflies that overwinter as adults in BC, and they take shelter in the leaf litter under bark or in tree cavities. And as you can see here, the coloring of the underwing conceals hibernating adults amongst dead leaves. So you may not even see them there. They blend right in. And the larvae of this butterfly are flecked with brown and white markings, which bear a close resemblance to bird droppings as a way to camouflage themselves and reduce predation. The larval food plant for this butterfly is the stinging nettle. Adults lay eggs on the stinging nettle. And that just happens to be a plant that we pulled out continuously in the garden I grew up in. We didn't know any better and were kind of just trying to avoid getting stings every time we were out working in the yard. But I hopefully we didn't have too massive an impact on these butterflies. Um, Unlike the comma, the dusky wing picture here overwinters as a caterpillar instead of as an adult, and they often use oak leaf litter, which is all around the capital region. Extensive removal of leaf litter in yards and pesticide use are really contributing to the decline of these native butterflies. And this hair streak butterfly here overwinters as eggs in lupin plants, as well as in the leaf litter below the lupin plant. And the larvae feed on the lupins throughout the spring before they start their life cycle again. So you can see that for butterflies, leaves are a great place to hide, to protect the next generation, um, whether by blending in with dead leaves or looking like bird poop. Blending is a survival strategy. It provides safety. The leaves provide food and shelter for these important insects. And if you see this poster from the Xerces Society, you might have seen it before, xerces.org. It encourages everyone to leave the leaves. Leaves are not litter. We have to change our thinking around that. They are food and winter shelter for butterflies, bees, beetles, moths, and more. And they also provide winter food for birds. So the next time you find yourself with a leaf rake in your hand, try to remember that leaves are not mess. They're habitat for overwintering beneficial insects in our yards and gardens. And if you need to rake them up, maybe put them in a pile to the side and just leave them in one spot for the winter so that those insects can continue their life cycle. Here we are back in a beautiful Garry Oak meadow again. This is Gore Park in central Saanich. Garry Oak meadows are masters of drought tolerance. So Garry Oak trees themselves use a combination of a deep tap root and a wide network of lateral roots to secure moisture and nutrients, which is really important in our region that tends to have dry summers. The iconic flowering plants of the meadow, such as white fawn lily, common and great camas, sea blush and blue-eyed Mary, shooting star, among many others, bloom early in the season and spend the hot, dry summer either as seeds, in the case of sea blush and blue-eyed Mary, or as bulbs or corms, in the case of camas, the fawn lily, the shooting star. This is how they get through the summer months. So a bit of a fun fact, did you know that camas bulbs can actually burrow down into the soil over time? They use a contractile root to pull themselves downward. You can kind of tell when they're doing that if you dig them up. Some of them are really long and skinny. This allows them to reach an ideal depth for moisture and temperature, as well as provide some safety from predators that might dig them up. Camas can reproduce both by seed and by developing bulblets off of the main bulb. Sea blush is a really prolific self-sower and germinates in the fall, so that by spring, when other plants start to grow, the sea blush is already this carpet of well-established little plants with a good root system in place. So these drought-tolerant strategies are just some of the ways that plants ensure the success of their next generations. This strategy is be a phoenix, which I think is pretty cool. We often view wildfires, forest fires, as a disaster, but those that aren't caused by humans are actually a natural process that allows new plant growth and encourages the overall health of forests. Hard to think about when it's smoky skies. As branches, needles, brush, and other forest floor debris is burned away, vital nutrients are released back into the soil. The forest canopy opens up, allows more sunlight in, which now stimulates new growth of grasses and shrubs on the forest floor. This in turn provides food for browsing animals like deer, and can offer, as a side product of that, more opportunities for predators to find prey in these new open spaces. Over time, as forest succession proceeds, from grasses and fungi to shrubs and trees, and the trees continue to grow, they eventually dominate the forest once again. So we're right back at that starting point again, and every plant has gone through its life cycle along that journey. So we're talking about here jack pine and lodgepole pine, which are two trees in BC that actually depend on fire to regenerate. So here we can see these closed cones here. Both species have these serotoneous, protected by a wax coating, cones that require extreme heat to release their seeds. So after the fire, you can see in the second image, the cone is opened up and these seeds can now fall out of the cone and and become part of the next generation of these pine trees. So this is a way that being a phoenix and rising from the ashes can actually be a strategy for the survival of your next generation. As many of us have learned in recent years from the research of forest ecologists such as Suzanne Simard, among others, it's that trees can communicate with each other via a fungal network underground. Known as the mycorrhizal network, trees are connected via a vast and intricate network of hair-like fungal filaments that are all just a few inches, in many cases, below the soil surface. The fungi surround the root tip with a sheath and extend a network of tiny fungal filaments called hyphae that grow between the tree's root cells. This structure is known as the Hartig net. So through this network, the trees provide the fungi with sugar, so it's a reciprocal relationship, and the fungi provide water and minerals to the trees. Mother trees or hub trees can access the network and use it to send distress signals to other trees in their vicinity about drought and disease or insect attacks, and the other trees can alter their behavior when they receive these messages. So we are looking at these networks from a provision for next generations. And we can see that hub trees will send food and nutrients to young trees to help them survive, especially in the shade of older trees, so in a more mature forest where they can't make their own food, they can't photosynthesize very well. So there's still a lot of research ongoing in this field, but I think it really does open our mind to the hidden life in our forests and how mother trees take care of younger generations through this communication network to ensure the longevity of the forest and the survival of the next generations. Another great strategy is to scatter your eggs. So instead of laying all your eggs in one deposit or nest, you spread them around to increase the chances of the next generation surviving. Here is one of my favorite little critters, the Pacific tree frog or chorus frog. They have an average of 400 to 750 eggs. They lay their eggs in small clusters of 5 to 60 eggs. Scattering their eggs in small clusters rather than in one large mass, it reduces the risk of predation and disease, wiping out an entire clutch all at once. And this strategy also allows the eggs to be dispersed in various locations, which increases the likelihood that some will find kind of those optimal conditions for development as well. A couple fun facts: Pacific tree frogs can change their color to match their surroundings, and it takes them a few days to complete that process. But that's why you sometimes find them the really beautiful bright green ones that are in your lawn or in some really bright greenery. And sometimes you find them brown or mottled if they're a bit more in leaf litter and that type of thing. The male Pacific tree frog, by the way, is the frog chorus you most often hear in the background in movies. Another beautiful frog we have is the northern red-legged frog, and this one averages 500 to 1,500 eggs. With a survival rate to metamorphosis at about 5%, they need a lot of eggs. Like the Pacific horse frog, they scatter their eggs, and the scattering of their egg clusters decreases the chances of predators locating and consuming all of their eggs at once. In this way, even if some of their eggs are eaten or disturbed, their entire brood isn't wiped out for the year. It just gives them that little bit of a leg up. Another fun fact here, northern red-legged frogs vocalize underwater in the spring to attract females. That's kind of different. And the older northern red-legged frogs get, the more red the red becomes. Northern red-legged frogs are blue listed in BC and are really susceptible to disturbances such as development. So looking at these two beautiful frog species, we can see how scattering your eggs can be a good way of ensuring the survival of the next generation and making sure that predators and disease can't wipe you out in one go. It might seem like the frogs we were just talking about were laying a lot of eggs, but Pacific salmon kind of have them beat. So with fecundity rates between 2,000 and 10,000 eggs per female, depending on the species and the size of the female at the time, Pacific salmon really hedge their bets when it comes to survival. So salmon, as you know, are subject to many threats from in the stream, dragonfly larvae, larger fish, kingfishers, heron, mink, and otters, for instance. And then once they hit the salt water, once they smolt, they're subject to commercial fishing, sports fishing. Sometimes they're bycatch of juveniles getting caught, natural predators such as bears when they're returning, eagles, the heron again, seals and sea lions and larger fish, and some orcas like our southern residents, as well as pollution, warmer summer temperatures in streams, climate change, and more. Pacific salmon really need to lay a lot of eggs to ensure there is a next generation to carry on their species. Okay, some more fish stories for you. Guard your babies. Some species have strategies to monitor and guard their young to certain stages of development, helping to ensure the survival of the next generation. And lingcod are one such example. You may be familiar with these coastal BC fish. They are interesting fish. They can live 15 to 25 years. So compared to salmon, they have long lives. The males migrate to the spawning area first and select a nest area in rocky crevices. Females will come along, they deposit their eggs in those crevices, and then they are fertilized by the male. Some females may have over 400,000 eggs in their egg masses, so it's a significant number. And the females leave shortly after that, and the male remains to actively guard these eggs for 5 to 11 weeks until they hatch out. And male lingcod take this duty very seriously and will aggressively bite or chase away anything, including divers. They'll use their bodies to block the nest, and they've even been seen carrying potential predators away, like sea stars, in their mouths. They'll just carry them off to another area. They also may remain at the nest site after the hatch is complete for some time. Yellow eye rockfish is another coastal BC species that is both long-lived and takes their early parenting duties really seriously. So they have been aged as old as 115 years in BC. But they're very slow growing, and it takes a really long time for them to reach reproductive maturity, so at about 20 years. So, overfishing is a real threat. Female yellow eye rockfish can produce between 1.2 and 2.7 million eggs annually. And the interesting thing about yellow eye and most rockfish is that they use internal fertilization. So the eggs actually develop inside the female, and after an average of 30 to 60 days, the female gives birth to live, kind of plankton-sized larval rockfish. And a fun fact is the females can store the sperm for weeks or months before fertilization. So in these ways, yellow eye rockfish do what they can to provide nutrients internally to their embryos, and this way increase the chances of survival by releasing their young as larval fish. Okay, so of course, there's also the seahorse, where dads really take the center stage. There are many species of seahorse worldwide, although none are found here on the coast of the Pacific Northwest. I just thought they were kind of interesting and deserve a mention. They typically live 1 to 5 years, and their life cycle is quite interesting. The female meets the male in his territory and they have a courtship. As they approach each other, they change color, they twine tails, they have these rituals they do. They'll circle each other, spiral around objects. When the display is over and the mating's over, the female will go back to her territory. But when mating, the female transfers her eggs to the male and he fertilizes them in his pouch. And in the male's pouch, the eggs receive everything they need from oxygen to food. And after a gestation time of 14 days to 4 weeks, they go through a birthing process that can last up to 12 hours as each little seahorse is birthed out of daddy's pouch. So these are strategies to guard your babies to ensure the success of their next generations. Okay, so we've looked at some interesting strategies so far and adaptations plants and animals use to help ensure the long-time survival of their next generations. As humans, we are part of the natural world too, and we have a special ability to rise above ourselves for the benefit of all species. So it's important that we look at that and let's ask ourselves, what are some actions we can take to do our part in ensuring the long-term health of the natural world for future generations? Here are a few ideas to just get us started. Volunteer or take part in restoration projects, plant native plants in your garden, help fundraise to protect vital habitat, create a conservation covenant on your property, donate land to a land trust, or make a gift in your will to the land trust. Looking at the first strategy, TLC works across BC to restore ecosystems through various restoration activities. So TLC staff and volunteers work on restoration projects, including the background here is in Saanich, a property in Souk at Iam Creek, the Highlands, and in Trail, BC. Restoration activities can include removing invasive species, replanting areas with native plants. It's a very satisfying thing to take part in, and if you're interested, please contact us to be added to our volunteer list. We'd love to have you out. Planting native plants is another quite simple strategy that most people can achieve, whether it's a balcony planter box or a front boulevard or a small corner of your backyard or a little patch of lawn. Replacing non-native plants with native plants can make a real difference for the pollinators that have co-evolved here and depend on native plants for their long-term health and survival. So pictured here is a lawn to native plant meadow project in central Saanich. First, a large section of lawn was removed, and then a wide variety of potted native plants and seeds were distributed over the area. The next spring, native plants such as sea blash, blue-eyed Mary, woolly sunflower, all started coming up. So it was very exciting to see that. And they took over the spot that used to be lawn. And they brought with them a wide variety of native pollinators, such as this beautiful green metallic sweat bee pictured here on the woolly sunflower. When we replaced native meadows and woodlands with lawns, we eliminated habitat for native pollinators and other wildlife. And we also created gaps too expansive for many species to cross. Many small native bees, for instance, have a range of only up to 200 meters from their nesting sites. So if things are really fragmented, they can't cross that gap. Benefits of meadow versus the lawn: it uses less water, uses less chemical treatments, helps store carbon, and you eliminate the awful noise from mowers, and you honor the plants and animals that evolved here together. And as a bonus, it frees up all that lawn mowing time. You get all that time back on the weekends. So really it is something to consider. And also looking at, why do we even have lawns? Lawns were a symbol of status in Europe, where flocks of sheep would graze grass short for wealthy landowners. And over time, settlers to North America replaced native vegetation with lawns, and the once diverse meadows and woodlands became unicultures, or blends of non-native grasses. So the good news though is that you don't have to tear up your whole yard to start making a real difference. It doesn't have to be an overwhelming project. Native plants can be added to balcony planters or integrated into your existing garden beds here and there. You can start small and add a few new plants each year, or just one new plant each year. Everyone can restore a little bit of their yard to meadow or woodland native plants. So that can happen in your balcony, your patio, your backyard. This is a real subject of passion for me. So if you need more help with this or are more interested in learning more about it, please contact me. I'd love to chat with you about it. So another strategy is to help fundraise for conservation. This is a great way to support the next generations, and we're really grateful to TLC supporters who have created and had fundraising events on our behalf in the past. There's a current one right now that's a running series. Every donation does make a difference, and fundraisers can be a great group activity for a club or a school or a business, and can be set up to celebrate special events such as a wedding, an anniversary, a birthday, Earth Day, a new baby, and more. Pretty much any event, life event you can think of could be a great chance to have a fundraiser. So we've had in the past fun runs, bottle drives, and bake sales, but there's lots of different ideas you can come up with. If you're interested in hosting a fundraiser for TLC, please let me know. We are honored to have your support and we'd be happy to help you organize. These next two fall under a strategy of protect vital ecosystems. So in this case with a conservation covenant. So for those of you who are not familiar with conservation covenants, they are legal agreements between a land trust and a property owner, a title holder, that is registered on title and flows forward with the land in perpetuity. So whoever owns it in the future, the conservation covenant is still there. The property owners and the land trust work together to create covenants, and they're usually to protect vital ecosystems on private land, such as wetlands, old growth forests, grasslands, and more. The majority of rare, threatened, and endangered species in BC are found on private land, and this is why conservation covenants are such an effective way to preserve biological diversity in BC for future generations. TLC itself holds over 250 conservation covenants across BC. Continuing with our theme of protecting vital ecosystems, another mechanism to protect land for the coming generations, which is really important, is through land donations. So land donations to a land trust ensure that more of our wild spaces actually remain wild for the benefit of coming generations and for the wildlife that live there. For example, in 2012, John and Edwina Curta donated 67 acres of wetland to TLC in the Clearwater River Valley, north of Kamloops, through the Eco Gifts Canada program. So this important wetland pictured here supports species of endangered plants and animals, and also acts as a wildlife corridor between the two southern lobes of Wells Gray Provincial Park. In 2018, new properties became available in the area, and TLC raised funds to purchase additional connecting properties. So now in total, TLC protects 140 acres in the upper Clearwater Valley. And this land donation has made a real difference for wildlife in the region and shows how one donation can actually spark other conservation opportunities nearby. And all towards safeguarding vital ecosystems for the benefit of future generations of plants, animals, and people. So planning for the future, what does it look like? So planning, like other flora and fauna of the world around us, it's important we too plan for the success and well-being of our future generations. We need to be thinking ahead. So we're just briefly going to look here at why donate to a charity in your will. It often means that a donor can make a donation far more substantial than they ever could during their lifetime. So your gift could actually allow a charity to undertake an important project or program they might not have been able to before, or it could allow the charity to plan for the future and expand its core mission in thoughtful and strategic ways. It could allow the charity to support a project that means so much to you. Do you have specific intentions? Just reach out to your charity to discuss that. This will give the charity a chance to share their vision for the future with you and how your donation can be put to best use and make the most impact. So you can protect vital habitat during your lifetime and or through gifts in your will. And in this way, ensure your conservation goals continue to be achieved for the benefit of future generations. Another strategy is gifts in a will. So in this case, protecting urban green space through a gift in a will. So gifts in a will are another way to protect land for future generations. So this could be a cash donation, a gift of land, a combination of both, what have you. All gifts are appreciated and help to continue to support the causes that matter to you during your lifetime. So one example of a cash and land donation is a bequest we received a few years ago from Joan Alston Stewart. Joan and her husband Gordon were longtime supporters of TLC with deep roots in the Saanich region. Joan moved to the Blenkinsop Valley as a young girl, and she really wished to see the lands she and her late husband Gordon had called home for decades protected to support the biodiversity of the Blenkinsop Valley in perpetuity. So, in the years prior to her passing, Joan met with TLC's staff and board to discuss her wish to protect this important urban green space surrounding her home and properties for birds and for other wildlife. Here's a picture of a pond on the property and one of the resident deer visiting. Joan passed away in February 2020 and gifted TLC with a bequest of 3 properties in the Blenkinsop Valley and funds as well to maintain the properties in perpetuity. And she also included a cash gift for TLC's Abkhazi Garden, if any of you are familiar with that beautiful spot. The $8.8 million bequest is the largest one in TLC's 25-year history. These properties are located near Blenkinsop Lake and the Lochside Trail in Saanich, and they span more than 8 acres of wetland, Garry oak, and Douglas fir habitat. TLC now holds restoration events in the Blenkinsop Valley on these properties to help protect biodiversity and to take care of the land that Joan entrusted TLC to protect for future generations. Sometimes difficult to talk about gifts in a will, but you might be just surprised to discover how you can actually really put your loved ones first and take care of your loved ones first and still make a real difference to the causes that you care about through a gift in your will. So TLC has partnered with a national campaign that you might have heard of called Willpower. And the goal of this campaign is to raise awareness about how gifts in your will can make a significant impact for charities and for future generations. So one of the ways that you can make sure your loved ones are given top priority is through a gift of residue. So here's an example. If you had an estate, maybe with a home or some other assets, the total value of your estate is $800,000. And as a donor, you want to make sure your loved ones are taken care of first. So you decide you're going to make a bequest of 2% of the residue of your estate to charity. That's still a very significant gift of $16,000 and still leaves $784,000 to take care of your loved ones. I have a second example, same estate, $800,000. You can see even here they've given a bequest of 10%. It's a massive gift to help a charity of $80,000, but you're still maintaining $720,000 to take care of your loved ones. So bequest gifts are a wonderful way to plan for future generations by ensuring that the causes that you care about doing important environmental work continue to do the work that matter to you in your lifetime. So talking about wills can be a bit of a dry subject, but an important one. But before we wrap up, I thought it'd be fun to share one final fun fact with you about life in the Garry Oak Meadow and something called buzz pollination. So although this photo was taken, I'm not going to say this right, but the Chilwaukee Prairie in Wisconsin by researcher Dr. Jeff Caron, these shooting star flowers and buzz pollination is happening every year in Garry Oak Meadows on Vancouver Island as well. Female bumblebees collect pollen from the flowers by humming a middle C note with their wings. And this vibration shakes pollen from the flower onto the bee. This type of pollination is called sonification or buzz pollination, and females of all bumblebee species can do it, including the 30 plus species of bumblebee found here in BC. So ensuring fertilization and the continuation of the flowering plant, as well as providing food for the next generation of bumblebees. In the photos above, we can see the bee approaching the flower on the left. In the middle, there's a fantastic photo that shows the release of the pollen from the flower in response to the correct note or vibration. So you can see it streaming down there. And in the last photo, we can see that the bee is grasping the flower with pollen just absolutely covering its abdomen. She will then groom the pollen from her body and collect it. They collect the pollen in these pollen carrying structures on their legs, sometimes back legs, sometimes called pollen pants, and use those to transport the pollen to her nest. I hope you've enjoyed today's presentation, and thank you so much for watching. Please contact me if you have any questions. My email's there, lmorey@conservancy.bc.ca. Our phone number is there, 250-479-8053. I'd love to hear from you. Any comments, any questions, you want to know more about pollinator meadows, happy to help. You want to volunteer for a restoration project, wonderful, get in touch. And if you want to know more about plant giving, wills, gifts in the will, please let me know. Love to hear from you about any of those things and any other comments you want to make. Thank you.